Hi, everybody. I'm immigration lawyer John Kostravi with the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox. Thanks for joining us again. We have a special episode today. We're talking with Mandy Feuerbacher, one of our colleagues, and doesn't practice much anymore because she runs Argo Visa. It's a great service for immigration lawyers and their clients. And we're going to go into what Argo does, so you know how to use their services and provide that additional oomph and push to can't make sure, there's no guarantees, as we're lawyers we can never say, but it's that's the feeling you get when you're in good hands. And I've had clients of my own talk with them and helped out a lot. So I want to make sure Mandy comes and talks with you about what everything's about with Argo Visa. Mandy, thank you for coming on the show again. You've been a guest before; it's not your first time.
Right. A couple times now, actually, John. And it's always such a pleasure to be back on your podcast and to talk to your listeners because I love talking to immigration attorneys. I love nerding out on immigration law, on consular processing. It's probably one of my favorite topics. And I will always consider myself an immigration attorney, even though my niche area is honestly just focusing on consular processing and how I can support my fellow attorneys in helping their clients and beneficiaries succeed in this, kind of a black box of a process.
Yeah, and as some may not know, you were a former consular officer in several different embassies. We have an in-depth interview that went place by place everywhere you're a consular officer at. I'll have to put the link in the show notes, link to podcast. Remember to do that, so we just could get a lot of your background and at that time to show your expertise. But former consular officer started this organization called Argo, and it just popped in my head when we were starting is, what is Argo about? I know there was a movie Argo. Is that in relation to that, or because that was sort of consular to Canadian consular, I guess?
Yeah, well, maybe people always ask me that. And actually, I think it is about the US government and consular officers. So it is very similar. I remember when I watched that movie, I was horrified at how scary it was because I could just imagine myself being one of those consular officers as people are climbing over the fence and you're trying to burn, confidential information and classified documents. So it is not based on the movie. I think the idea of Argo came about because it's like this mythical ship in Greek history or mythology that carries people from one land to the other. And it's sort of a symbol for what we're trying to do with Argo, helping international visa applicants who are applying for their US visas, carrying them safely over to the US. And I think our goals are very similar to most US immigration attorneys who are doing the same kind of work.
That's neat. I didn't know about where that word comes from. I heard it a million times, but it's interesting. It really does match immigration. I guess the ancient Greek history, they had immigration avenues like that too. So
Exactly.
in mythology, so you have this organization you started. It's been a couple of years now. How big is it now? How many former consular officers do you have, and how many languages?
Yeah. So currently we have 25 former consular officers. They have worked at US embassies and consulates all around the world, all had careers with the US State Department, and we speak 14 different languages. We most recently recruited the former non-immigrant visa chief from the US Embassy in New Delhi. He also worked.
It's almost
Yeah,
like the NBA draft or NFL draft. Like that's a good one to get. Yeah, first round
that
pick.
really feels like it. Yeah, and he also previously worked at the US Embassy in Ankara and is a Farsi speaker, so very helpful for Iranian, applicants.
Yeah.
And so definitely feel like we hit the jackpot with him. And so I think the great thing about Argo is that we are a collective source of knowledge for consular processing and consular information. And, we're all connected on Slack and we have conversations all the time about these interesting situations that we come across during our consultations and speak about our experiences. And so while we don't have a former consular officer for every country in the world, I think that's the goal in the future. We do have them for, all of the major countries that U.S. immigration attorneys have to deal with, from India to China to Brazil to Canada to Mexico, Guatemala, France, the UK. And so our collective expertise as subject matter experts on this very important part of immigration law makes us uniquely suited to really work with immigration attorneys and help support you in your practices.
Well, I'm really excited because now I have a new guest we're going to have on with this new consular officer with the former section chief of Delhi. Definitely, I'd love to have them on to talk with them. Now, so can you give us some examples of people who came to you and it kind of through it help people know how people connect with you, and also like what happened in the story, like what it does to work with an Argo agent or I guess agent is the term. What term would you call your team members?
We just call them Argo officers. It's because we were consular officers, so that's what we're used to hearing. So we provide strictly non-legal guidance to your beneficiaries and your clients before they go in for their visa interview. And we prepare them for their interview. We help understand their situation so that we can help them frame their situation in a way that makes sense to the visa officer. Because what we realized when we were when we were consular officers with the State Department is so many international citizens, foreign nationals, don't know how to frame their situation and have an effective short discussion with a visa officer to explain their situation and their intentions. And that could get them into big trouble because consular officers are really used to reading expressions. It's not just about the answers that they're given. They're usually observing and watching how you're acting and behaving, and they want everything to align, and they compare what is on paper about them in the petition prepared by you guys, by immigration attorneys, to the person who's standing in front of them, because consular officers know that USCIS officers, they're not having these face-to-face interviews. They're just reading a piece of paper, that you put together very carefully. But consular officers are the first people to actually see the people in person, and they want to make sure that person matches the paper. And so this is what we do. We help them frame their situations better. We do mock interviews with them until we're satisfied that when they go into their interview, they're going to be those people that get the 30-second approvals, no additional questions. We're very passionate about what we do. It's very fun to help visa applicants and make sure that they're ready for the interview, because we have seen some disastrous things happen at the visa interview when people don't know how to prepare, when they don't know how to be effective and authentic and truthful. And you need all of those things, and you need to be concise, and you need to know how exactly to talk to an American consular officer under pressure in just a few minutes' time.
It reminded me of a case that we sent your way, and when we started talking to the consular officer, I was in on it to see how everything works. And at first, it was a friend. We were just talking, laughing about, everything's going to happen. And then once the consular hat went off, the emotions went away, and it became so professional and somewhat harsh. So there were like some pointed questions that were like out of left field. And like when the applicant or beneficiary didn't respond, they asked again, kind of a semi-harsh way to kind of recreate the environment. It was like interesting. It was kind of funny to see that switch to having like a regular thing to just being a serious, but that was good. So the person sees, there's a potential. I might have someone who's very adversarial potential come at you. You want to prepare for everything that's possible.
That's exactly right. And every question that you're asked is an opportunity to present your case to the consular officer. And we at Argo really believe in applicants taking a very proactive approach to the visa interview, not, a passive approach, because a lot of times what we tell clients is, okay, you're going to have to get that information in front of the consular officer, even if they don't ask you about it. And here's the best way to introduce that information, right? Without trying too hard. And so it's really important, because I think on the internet, with visa agents, with people who don't understand the process, usually clients are told, just say as little as possible. This is your visa to lose. But that's absolutely not true. The burden is on the client to make a case for themselves. And so they have to be prepared to talk about themselves and to sell themselves. And most of your clients are not used to doing that, much less, possibly not even in their native tongue in English. And so I think one of the things that we do really well is not only can we prepare them for an interview in English, we also speak these other languages that we're fluent in. I'm fluent in Mandarin Chinese, for example, and I can really put a Chinese client at ease and help them speak their native tongue so that they know exactly what to expect going into the interview. And the difference is like night and day. When we start the consultation, they're nervous, they don't have confidence. By the time we're done with the consultation, they know exactly what to expect, how to address those tough questions. And, it's such a perfect package for us to partner with attorneys so that you guys can do what you do best, which is the USCIS side of things. And then for us to really help you make sure that your clients are not going to suddenly be nervous and forget everything they're, told, and then just start saying crazy things, which happens sometimes.
Yeah. And what are some typical cases that you've seen, like, for example, in the employment-based arena, that you've dealt with?
Yeah, so great question. So recently, we did a slew of consultations for L1 visas for intra-company transferees, for managers, and specialized knowledge. And it was really interesting for these clients for specialized knowledge. When we first started having the conversation, they had a lot of trouble explaining exactly what their specialties are and what their special expertise is in. So we really helped them frame their situation so they can talk about that. And the client was referred by an immigration law firm, and the client was a company in China. And so I did one of the consultations, so speaking with the client in Chinese, and all of the questions that I asked them, you're going to the US just for a month on an L1, actually, so a short period of time. How much are you going to be getting paid in the US? You don't speak any English. How do you plan to be able to interact with your American colleagues and do these trainings? And they had no idea. And I think so much of the process is handled by immigration attorneys, and you guys do such a good job. But they also rely very heavily on attorneys to have everything taken care of for them. They don't even expect, oh, if I actually go into this interview, what am I going to say? So once we did a lot of preparing, explaining these questions, like how are you going to interact if you don't speak English? How much are you going to get paid? You definitely need to know what's in your petition and reference that. I'm really happy to announce that all 4 of these L1 visa applicants got approved their visas, and now the company is going to be sending us more of their visa applicants. And this is such an important part of the process, and I think it's usually sort of diminished and not seen as that important, but it could ruin everything if it does not go well.
Yeah, you gotta go to the finish line, especially L's, because the lawyers are so engulfed in the work regarding with USCIS and the back and forth with them to get either individual L's or blanket L's approved, all that kind of stuff. And then usually deal with the employer. So the employee many times kind of gets lost in the mix, but them having individual attention is so important, because everyone just,
Right.
It's just something you see when you have that dual representation kind of situation happening.
You're absolutely right. And that is exactly what happens. And it's important to do that so they get to the finish line. And then, it's positive for everyone, because, the last thing that I want for immigration attorneys is for you to do, so much dedicated work. And then for the interview to not go well, it reflects badly on the reputation of the law firm. And that's not fair at all, because you guys did everything you're supposed to do. And it's just that last bit. And the other thing I will say is, I think we're able to speak to foreign nationals in such a way where we can definitively answer their questions. What will this look like to the consular officer? What questions are likely to come up? Why was my case stuck in administrative processing? What will happen? So all of these answers that I think you all can answer to the extent that you've had experience with it before, but being the source of the information really makes a huge difference, because we know exactly what they're going to think and how that case is going to be looked at. And oftentimes, attorneys can sit in on our consultations, but we'll tell a client to do something, and the attorney will say, I've been telling this client to do that for ages, but they won't listen to me. And I think because we're former visa officers, we're like, you absolutely have to listen to your immigration attorney. You have to do this. And they're like, oh, okay, I'll do whatever you say. And just like you said, we put our consular officer hat on, and all of a sudden we're just like, total machines, and kind of brutal in some ways, but we want to make sure that you're prepared for whatever happens at that visa window.
Real cool. I appreciate it. Now, if people wanted to connect with you, argovisa.com is the website. You're pretty active on social media and LinkedIn as well. It's good to follow you personally, Mandy Feuerbacher, to look that up. But what is the process? So, like, who pays? And just what could you do a basic walk?
Yeah.
How someone connects with you guys?
Absolutely. So, what we usually propose for law firms is just a little trial partnership of 15 consultations so that we can see how your firm works, how we can best support your clients. After you do this trial of 15, we can get back to the table and see if you want to buy more consultations. I am so certain that your clients will love it, and so will you. And if this is something that you're interested in for your practice, just to make sure that your clients are going to get to the finish line, you can reach out to me. My name is Mandy Feuerbacher. My email address is mfeuerbacher@argovisa.com. But if that's too long to remember, you can also shoot us an email at partners@argovisa.com. And I get all of those emails, and I will be in touch with you to see how we can support you in your practice.
Great. I'll put that in the show notes in the description so people have that. Well, thank you. Is there anything else you want to mention? Any social media sites as well that it's good to know?
Yeah, I mean, we have a very active YouTube channel and a TikTok channel now where we are always talking about visa advice. We have a podcast. And one thing I want to say before we finish up, John, is that, I think for so long, people are thinking, oh, okay, well, we'll only get help if our clients get in trouble or get stuck in administrative processing or get denied. But really what Argo is trying to do is really helping immigration attorneys be more proactive about this process, be a lot more intentional about success at the consular stage, because it becomes such a huge mess if they don't succeed the first time. And you don't really want to be cleaning up that mess or dealing with that blow to your reputation. So, I mean, I sound biased, but every single person, because the consular process situation is so dangerous and it's so high stakes, best to have every single client prepare with a former consular officer to make sure that everything will go the way that it's supposed to be and your hard work will pay off.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for that. We'll have the contact information there. I've used it as very helpful. At the very least, clients are nervous. Just talking with somebody with Argo helps kind of calm them down at the very least. But it really helps out in organizing and being prepared and having more well thought out, and especially with the languages. Having a Farsi speaker is going to be really helpful. I'm really happy to hear that. That's really cool. But again, Mandy, thanks for coming on, and I hope you have the show again and your team members as well. You also have a good article that you published in the Toolbox magazine you can check out about K-1 visas. We're going to talk about all this stuff, but it just, when we start talking immigration, there's all these different things to talk about. But definitely have you back on again, and check out the article in the Toolbox magazine. Mandy and her team just regularly put articles there. A lot of former consular officers just help everybody. Aside from Argo, it's just like it's a good thing to have sharing this information for the community. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me back, John. And it's always such a pleasure to speak to you and all of your followers and subscribers. I'm a huge fan of the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox, and I always feel very honored to be able to contribute.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. Stay on the line, but thanks everyone. Go argovisa.com and learn more. Bye.
Talk to you all soon.